Quartermaster Vorthak adjusted his mandibles in what passed for a smirk among his species, the chitinous plates clicking together with satisfaction. Oh, how the mighty had fallen! Here he was, the legendary sniper who had picked off rebel leaders across 3 star systems, reduced to what command euphemistically called pest control on some backwater human colony. Really? Amy Kowalski was supposed to be his target? A human? A human? The irony was not lost on him. Vorthak had eliminated Krillian war chiefs from impossible distances, had threaded plasma bolts through asteroid fields to hit moving targets, had even taken out a Nexarian battleship commander through a porthole while both vessels were engaged in combat maneuvers. And now? Now he was supposed to feel challenged by eliminating some primitive mammal who probably still used projectile weapons. Kepler 442 billion, he muttered, consulting his tactical display with obvious disdain. What kind of species names a planet with numbers and letters? No poetry, no honor in their nomenclature. Just coordinates. The morning air on this human world was disgustingly breathable. Vorthak had hoped for at least some atmospheric challenge, maybe some toxic gases to make things interesting. Instead, he got perfect visibility, optimal humidity, and a light breeze that would barely affect his shots. Where was the sport in that? Where was the challenge that had made his reputation? His plasma rifle, the MKV Void Piercer, hummed with contained energy beside him. The weapon was a masterpiece of Zephyrian engineering, quantum-locked targeting matrix, self-adjusting atmospheric compensation, and enough firepower to punch through starship armor. Using it on a human was like swatting a fly with a neutron hammer. Excessive? Perhaps. But Vorthak had a reputation to maintain, even if this assignment was beneath him. The targeting system's holographic display flickered to life, casting eerie blue light across his scaled features. Range to target zone, 2.3 kilometers, child's play. He had made shots at triple that distance in the vacuum of space. The rifle's AI began its scanning sequence, mapping terrain, calculating wind patterns, and analyzing atmospheric disturbances with mechanical precision. Target designation, Amy Kowalski. The weapon's synthetic voice announced in crisp Zephyrian. Human female, estimated age 34 standard years, height 1.7 meters, weight 63 kilograms, threat level negligible, negligible. Vorthak's mandibles clicked again. Of course she was negligible. She was human. These soft-skinned primates had barely crawled out of their gravity wells when the Zephyrian Empire was already conquering star systems. They thought they were clever with their little colonies, their quaint attempts at terraforming, their pathetic defensive installations. It was almost endearing, really, like watching children play with toy soldiers. The mountainous overlook provided perfect concealment. Vorthak had positioned himself among the rocky crags with the casual expertise of someone who had done this dance 1,000 times before. His adaptive camouflage suit shifted colors to match the stone and sparse vegetation, was rendering him effectively invisible to any primitive optical detection the humans might possess. Not that they would think to look for him anyway. Humans were notoriously poor at tactical thinking. Below, the human settlement spread out like a textbook example of poor defensive planning. No elevated positions, minimal perimeter security, and laughably predictable patrol patterns. Vorthak had studied their movements for exactly 17 minutes before dismissing them as threats. The longest part of his preparation had been setting up his equipment, not analyzing their defenses. 17 confirmed kills on Proxima Station, he murmured to himself, running through his greatest hits like a mantra. 23 successful eliminations during the Tau Ceti campaign. The impossible shot through the nebula at Vega Prime. His voice carried the weight of legend of stories told in military academies across the Empire. And now this. The settlement's main compound sat in a valley bowl, surrounded by agricultural fields and what appeared to be some sort of mining operation. Standard human colonial layout, utilitarian, efficient, and strategically mindless. They had built their leadership center in the most exposed possible location, with clear sight lines from at least 6 different elevated positions. It was almost insulting how easy this was going to be. Vorthak's secondary arms adjusted the rifle's stabilization system, while his primary hands caressed the trigger mechanism. The weapon's targeting laser was invisible to human optical ranges, and its plasma bolt would be faster than their primitive reflexes could possibly detect. One shot, one kill, and then he could return to command and request assignment to something worthy of his talents. Amy Kowalski, he said her name like it tasted bitter. Prepare to become a footnote in military history. The targeting scope's magnification brought the human settlement into crystal clarity, and Vorthak had to resist the urge to laugh out loud at what he saw. Their so-called defensive perimeter consisted of what appeared to be modified farming equipment. Surely those couldn't be actual weapons emplacements. They looked like agricultural sprinklers that some creative human had welded metal plates onto. Primitive doesn't even begin to cover it, Vorthak muttered, fine-tuning his scope's resolution. I've seen more threatening sandcastles. Through the enhanced optics, he could make out individual humans going about their daily routines with the blissful ignorance of prey animals. They moved in predictable patterns, clustering around their makeshift structures with all the tactical awareness of grazing livestock. And there, emerging from the largest building in the compound, was his target. Amy Kowalski looked exactly as unremarkable as her species profile suggested. Average height, unremarkable build, wearing what appeared to be standard colonial work clothing. Nothing about her screamed military leader or threat to imperial interests. She was just another soft-skinned mammal who happened to be in charge of this particular collection of soft-skinned mammals. Target acquired, he announced to his spotter Trooper Zix, who was positioned 3 meters to his left with observation equipment. Beginning engagement sequence. Trooper Zix, a younger Zephyrian with barely 2 campaigns under his belt, peered through his own scope with nervous energy. Sir, should we conduct additional reconnaissance? Standard protocol calls for. Standard protocol, Vorthak interrupted with a dismissive click of his mandibles, is for challenging targets. This is target practice. The Void Piercer's targeting computer calculated wind speed, atmospheric pressure, planetary rotation, and 17 other variables in milliseconds. The solution appeared as a green crosshair overlay, perfectly centered on Amy Kowalski's torso. Range 2,304 meters. Confidence level 99.7%. Time to impact 1.2 seconds. Vorthak's finger caressed the trigger. This would be over so quickly it would barely qualify as an engagement. Perhaps he should record it for the Academy archives as an example of textbook long-range elimination. Future snipers could study his technique, learn from his perfection. He squeezed. The plasma bolt shrieked through the morning air, leaving a brief orange trail as it ionized atmospheric particles. In 1.2 seconds, Amy Kowalski would simply cease to exist, vaporized by Zephyrian military precision. 1.2 seconds passed. Amy Kowalski bent down to pick up something from the ground. The plasma bolt scorched the air exactly where her head had been, striking a metal shipping container behind her with a thunderous crash. She straightened up, brushed dirt off what appeared to be a dropped tool, and continued walking as if nothing had happened. Vorthak blinked his 4 eyes in sequence, a nervous habit he thought he had outgrown decades ago. Atmospheric disturbance, he diagnosed. Freak thermal pocket. Recalculating. The targeting computer ran its calculations again. Same result. Same 99.7% confidence. Amy had moved to inspect some kind of equipment near the compound's center, standing perfectly still in clear line of sight. Second shot. This time, Amy chose that exact moment to wave at someone across the courtyard, leaning slightly to her right. The plasma bolt vaporized the air where her left shoulder had been, embedding itself in the ground behind her with enough force to create a small crater. Sir, Trooper Zix said carefully, perhaps the humans have some kind of. They have nothing, Vorthak snapped. Random movement. Coincidence. These creatures don't even have proper military training. But his mandibles were clicking rapidly now, a sign of agitation that he hoped Zix wouldn't notice. 2 misses in a row was unusual. Not unheard of, but unusual. Environmental factors, perhaps. local magnetic fields interfering with the plasma containment. Something explainable. Something that had nothing to do with human capability. Third shot. Amy had stopped to examine what looked like a communications array, standing motionless for a full 30 seconds. Vorthak held his breath, steadied his aim, and fired with mechanical precision. Amy sneezed. The violent motion of her sneeze tilted her head down and to the left by exactly the margin necessary for the plasma bolt to pass harmlessly over her skull. She wiped her nose with her sleeve and continued her inspection of the equipment. That, Vorthak said slowly, was not random. Sir, maybe we should consider. Consider what? The question came out harsher than intended. That these hairless primates have developed precognitive abilities? That they've somehow detected our position from over 2 kilometers away using their primitive sensor technology? His voice dripped with sarcasm, but underneath was a growing thread of something he refused to acknowledge as concern. Fourth shot. Fifth shot. Sixth shot. Amy scratched her head. Amy bent to tie her bootlace. Amy turned to answer someone calling her name from across the compound. Each time, each perfect shot, each 99.7% certainty missed by millimeters. Sir, Zix's voice had taken on a distinctly worried tone. The humans appear to be responding to our fire. Look. Look. Vorthak shifted his scope view to encompass more of the settlement. Other humans had indeed taken notice of the repeated plasma impacts. But instead of diving for cover or raising alarms as any sensible species would do, they seemed to be watching. Some were pointing in the general direction of the impacts. Others appeared to be taking notes. Taking notes. Impossible, Vorthak muttered. They can't possibly have detected our position. Our camouflage is military grade. Our heat signature is masked. We're using quantum lock targeting that leaves no trace signature they could detect with their technology. Amy Kowalski had stopped her inspection routine and was now standing in the center of the compound, hands on her hips, looking directly up at the mountainous overlook where Vorthak was positioned. Even at this distance, through the scope's magnification, he could swear she was smiling. She raised her right hand and made a gesture that Vorthak's cultural database identified as a human expression of dismissal and mild contempt. Sir, Zix said quietly, I think we need to reassess this situation. But Vorthak's pride, carefully constructed over decades of successful campaigns, refused to bend. These were humans. Humans. The same species that had barely developed interstellar flight, that still used chemical propulsion for most of their spacecraft, that thought fusion reactors were advanced technology. The idea that they could outmaneuver a Zephyrian sniper was not just unlikely, it was absurd. Seventh shot, he announced grimly. Target is stationary. No wind. Perfect conditions. Amy Kowalski stood motionless in the compound center, apparently waiting for him to fire. Vorthak pulled the trigger with grim determination. The plasma bolt streaked toward its target with mathematical certainty, and for one glorious moment, he was sure this nightmare would finally end. Amy Kowalski would be vaporized, his reputation would be restored, and he could return to command with his dignity intact. Amy yawned and stretched her arms above her head, arching her back in a casual motion that moved her torso exactly 7 centimeters to the left. The plasma bolt passed through empty air and obliterated a water storage tank behind her. She completed her stretch, rolled her shoulders like someone working out morning stiffness. And then this couldn't be happening. She looked directly at his position and gave him a small, mocking wave. That's impossible, Vorthak breathed, his voice barely audible even to himself. She can't see us. She can't know where we are. But Amy's next action suggested otherwise. She walked over to the largest building in the compound and disappeared inside, only to emerge moments later carrying what appeared to be a folding chair. She set it up in the exact center of the courtyard, sat down, and pulled out what looked like a handheld device. Then she began typing. Sir, Trooper Zix's voice cracked with barely controlled panic. My equipment is reading some very strange energy signatures from the human settlement. Vorthak tried to respond, but his targeting computer chose that moment to emit a series of warning chirps that sent ice through his veins. The holographic display flickered, showing readings that made no sense. According to the sensors, there were now 17 Amy Kowalski scattered throughout the compound, each one registering identical life signs. System malfunction, he muttered, performing a diagnostic reset. Has to be a system malfunction. The display cleared, then repopulated with normal readings. One Amy Kowalski, sitting calmly in her chair, still typing on her device. Vorthak felt a moment of relief until he noticed that his targeting solution now showed a confidence level of 23.4%. 23.4%. His quantum-locked targeting matrix, capable of calculating shots through asteroid fields and solar flare interference, was somehow only 23% confident about hitting a stationary target at 2.3 kilometers in perfect atmospheric conditions. "What are you doing to my equipment?" He snarled at the distant figure, as if she could hear him. Amy looked up from her typing, directly at his position again, and shrugged with exaggerated helplessness. Then she held up her device, and even at this distance Vorthak could see text displayed on its screen. Large text. Text that seemed to be written specifically for someone with a high-powered scope to read. Shot count 7. Accuracy 0%. Please try harder. Vorthak's 4 eyes widened in perfect synchronization. She was keeping score. This human, this primitive mammal, was treating his professional assassination attempt like some kind of recreational activity. "Sir." Zix's voice had risen to a near shriek. "I'm getting massive interference on all communication channels. I can't raise command. I can't raise the ship. Every frequency is just static." Vorthak tried his own communication array, cycling through emergency frequencies with increasing desperation. Nothing. Where moments before he had clear channels to orbit, now there was only electronic noise that seemed almost deliberately crafted to sound like mocking laughter. His secondary systems were failing too. The atmospheric processor that should have been giving him wind speed and density readings was now showing impossible data, wind speeds that changed direction every few seconds, atmospheric density that fluctuated between vacuum and liquid, temperature readings that violated basic thermodynamics. "This isn't possible," he repeated, but the words were starting to sound hollow even to himself. "Their technology level can't support this kind of electronic warfare." But the evidence was mounting. His rifle's auto-stabilization system began making tiny corrections that seemed random rather than compensating for environmental factors. The quantum targeting matrix flickered between confidence levels like a broken gambling device. Even his camouflage suit, which should have been adapting to local conditions automatically, was cycling through colors that made no sense: bright orange, electric blue, patterns that seemed designed to advertise his position rather than conceal it. "Sir, we need to abort this mission," Zix said, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. "Something is very wrong here." Through his scope, Vorthak watched Amy finish typing her message. She held up the device again, and new text appeared. "Would you like to surrender now, or shall we continue this embarrassing display?" She waited exactly 10 seconds, then updated the message, "Taking your silence as please continue embarrassing me." Another 10 seconds, shot number 8 whenever you're ready. Vorthak's hands actually trembled as he lined up his 8th shot. His targeting computer was now showing a confidence level that fluctuated between 2.1% and 97.8% every few seconds, as if it couldn't decide whether Amy was standing perfectly still or performing acrobatic maneuvers. He fired anyway. Amy had pulled a sandwich from somewhere and was taking a bite. She chewed thoughtfully, swallowed, and then casually leaned forward to pick up a water bottle she had apparently placed on the ground beside her chair. The plasma bolt passed through the space where her head had been, close enough that she should have felt the heat wash. She took a sip of water, looked up at his position, and gave him a thumbs-up gesture. Her device updated, shot 8, still terrible. "Are you sure you're a professional?" "This isn't random," Vorthak said, his voice hollow with growing realization. "This isn't coincidence. She knows exactly when I'm firing. She knows exactly where each shot is going. But that's impossible unless..." unless the humans had somehow gained access to technology that could predict or intercept quantum-locked targeting solutions. Unless they had developed electronic warfare capabilities that could selectively disable Zephyrian military equipment. Unless everything the Empire believed about human technological capabilities was catastrophically wrong. "Sir," Zix whispered, "look at the settlement perimeter." Vorthak shifted his scope view and felt his blood turn to ice water. The modified farming equipment he had dismissed earlier was moving, rotating, tracking, following the exact trajectory his plasma bolts had taken, tracing the path back to his position with mechanical precision. Those weren't farming implements with metal plates welded on. Those were targeting systems, sophisticated ones, possibly more sophisticated than his own. Amy's device updated one final time. Final warning, surrender now or discover why underestimating humans is a career-ending mistake. She stood up from her chair, folded it with casual efficiency, and walked back toward the main building. But instead of entering, she stopped at the doorway and turned back toward his position one last time. Even without magnification, even at 2.3 kilometers distance, Vorthak could see her smile. She raised her right hand, pointed directly at his concealed position, and made a gesture he didn't need his cultural database to interpret. She was counting down from 5. 4. Old Vorthak's rifle display went completely dark. Not flickering, not malfunctioning, completely dead. The quantum-locked targeting matrix that had cost the Empire more resources than most planetary conquests simply ceased to exist as far as his weapon was concerned. 3. "Sir, my observation equipment just died," Zix reported, his voice climbing toward panic. "Everything's offline. Scopes, communication arrays, even the backup power cells are showing zero charge." 2. "Ew." A new sound reached Vorthak's audio receptors, the distinctive whine of charging energy weapons, multiple energy weapons, coming from directions that should have been empty mountainside. His head swiveled frantically, trying to locate the source, but his enhanced hearing was picking up the sounds from everywhere and nowhere at once. One. Amy Kowalski's voice carried across 2.3 kilometers with impossible clarity, as if she were speaking directly into his audio receivers. "Hello, Quartermaster Vorthak. My name is Amy Kowalski, former Lieutenant Colonel, Human Colonial Defense Force, specializing in xenotech integration and counter-sniper operations. You have been systematically disabled by technology you didn't think we possessed. Please remain calm while we explain how thoroughly you've been outmaneuvered. 0. The Void Piercer, his legendary weapon, his technological masterpiece, made a sound Vorthak had never heard before, a resigned electronic sigh. The display flickered back to life just long enough to show a message in perfect Zephyrian script, weapon systems permanently disabled by remote access. Thank you for choosing human engineering solutions. Then it died forever. This is impossible, Vorthak whispered, but his voice lacked conviction now. We never shared our technology. We never allowed humans access to our systems. There's no way they could have learned to interface with Zephyrian equipment. Amy's voice continued with infuriating cheer. Oh, but you did share your technology. Every time you attacked a human settlement, every time you left behind damaged equipment, every time you assumed we were too primitive to reverse engineer your systems. Did you think we just buried your crashed ships and forgot about them? Through his now useless scope, which was somehow still functional for observation, he noted with bitter irony. Vorthak watched Amy walk back to her chair and sit down. She was holding what appeared to be a standard human tablet, but as he watched, the device's display shifted and changed, showing what looked suspiciously like Zephyrian technical readouts. 3 years ago, Amy continued, and Vorthak realized she was broadcasting on their secure military frequencies. You conducted a raid on Darwin settlement. Remember that? Routine pest control, you called it. You lost 2 snipers and left behind a damaged MK Void Piercer. We spent 18 months taking it apart, studying every component, mapping every circuit. Vorthak's memory banks supplied the incident report. Darwin settlement, successful elimination of human leadership, minimal casualties, 1 rifle loss to environmental hazards. The report had classified it as acceptable losses during a textbook operation. 18 months, Amy repeated. Do you know what humans can accomplish in 18 months when we're properly motivated? We learn to read your quantum signatures. We learn to interpret your targeting algorithms. We learn to predict exactly where your shots would go and exactly when you would fire them. The pieces were falling into place with horrifying clarity. The impossible evasions weren't luck or coincidence, they were choreographed responses to his targeting computer's predictions. Amy had been dancing around his shots because she knew exactly where they would be. But the real breakthrough, Amy said, and Vorthak could hear the smile in her voice, came when we figured out how to reverse your remote access protocols. See, your rifles are designed to receive updates from command ships, which means they're designed to accept external data inputs. We just had to learn the right language to speak to them. Zix's equipment chose that moment to emit a series of electronic death rattles before falling silent forever. The younger Zephyrian looked at Vorthak with wide, terrified eyes. Sir, they've killed everything. Our communicators, our sensors, our emergency beacons, it's all dead. The settlement, Vorthak said slowly, pieces of the puzzle arranging themselves in his mind. This whole place, it's a trap. Kepler 442 billion Colonial Outpost 7, Amy confirmed cheerfully. Also known as the Human Colonial Defense Force's primary xenotech research and field testing facility. We've been hoping someone like you would show up. Our counter-sniper protocols needed a proper field test. The fake agricultural equipment around the perimeter was now openly revealing its true nature. Weapon emplacements rose from concealed positions, sensor arrays unfolded from camouflaged installations, and what Vorthak had dismissed as primitive defensive measures transformed into a sophisticated military installation that would have made Imperial engineers jealous. You see, Quartermaster. Amy continued, we humans have a saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. You've been fooling us for decades with your technological superiority and your casual dismissal of human capability. But we're very quick learners and we have excellent memories. Vorthak tried to activate his rifle's emergency protocols, hoping to at least destroy the weapon before it could provide the humans with more intelligence. Nothing happened. The controls were completely unresponsive, as if the rifle had forgotten it was supposed to obey him. Don't bother trying to slag your equipment, Amy said, apparently reading his mind. We've already downloaded everything we need from your systems. Targeting algorithms, communication protocols, equipment specifications, it's all been copied to our servers. Your rifle is now essentially a very expensive sculpture. The truth hit Vorthak like a plasma bolt to the chest. They hadn't just disabled his equipment, they had been systematically harvesting intelligence from every system he carried. His rifle, his scope, his communication array, even his life support systems had all been compromised from the moment he'd arrived on this world. The question now, Amy said, standing up from her chair and beginning to walk toward the building again, is whether you'd prefer to surrender gracefully or continue this exercise in futility until your air supply runs out. Because yes, we've also taken control of your environmental suits. You have approximately 47 minutes of breathable atmosphere remaining. Vorthak's suit display confirmed the impossible. His air recyclers had been shut down remotely, and his oxygen reserves were indeed dropping steadily toward zero. Sir, Zix whispered, what do we do? For the first time in his military career, Quartermaster Vorthak, legendary sniper of the Zephyrian Empire, had no answer. Desperation drove Vorthak to try one last gambit. If his rifle's targeting systems were compromised, perhaps he could still fire manually. He reached for the plasma chamber release, intending to check the weapon's physical ammunition status, and froze. The chamber was empty, not depleted empty. As in, completely void of the plasma cartridges he had loaded personally that morning. But nestled where his ammunition should have been was a small piece of what appeared to be human paper, folded neatly and tied with a ribbon. With trembling fingers he extracted the note and unfolded it. written in careful Zephyrian script, obviously by someone who had taken time to learn proper military calligraphy, were two words: "Nice try." Below that, in smaller text, "P.S. Your camouflage suit has been malfunctioning for the past 6 hours. We've been watching you the entire time, AK. Sir." Zix's voice had gone completely flat with shock. When could they have accessed our position? We maintained watch rotation. We followed all security protocols. Vorthak stared at the note, his mind reeling. Amy Kowalski had been here. At his position, close enough to touch his equipment, to remove his ammunition, to leave a handwritten message in perfect Zephyrian script. She had been inches away from him while he slept, and he had never known. "Last night," he whispered, "during my rest cycle. But you were on watch. You would have seen anyone approaching." "Sir," Isaac's voice trailed off as he consulted his recorded observations. "According to my logs, nothing approached our position. All sensor readings were normal. There was no indication of human infiltration using captured Zephyrian stealth technology." Amy's voice interrupted cheerfully over their compromised communication channel. "Really, gentlemen, did you think we only reverse-engineered your weapons? We've had cloaking suits for 2 years now. We improved versions, actually. Ours don't malfunction when exposed to mild electromagnetic interference." As if to prove her point, the air around their position shimmered, and suddenly there were humans everywhere. At least a dozen figures materialized from what had appeared to be empty mountainside, all wearing what looked like modified Zephyrian camouflage suits, but all carrying weapons that bore a suspicious resemblance to Imperial military equipment. "Surrender now," called one of the humans, a tall male with the bearing of professional military, "and we'll escort you safely to your extraction point. Continue to resist, and we'll be forced to demonstrate our proficiency with your own weapons." Vorthak looked at his useless rifle, at Zix's terrified expression, at the humans who had somehow turned superior Zephyrian technology against its creators. His oxygen supply continued its steady countdown toward 0. His equipment was dead. His position was compromised. His ammunition was gone. His legendary career was over. "We surrender," he said, the words tasting like poison. The retreat that followed would haunt Vorthak for the rest of his military service, what little remained of it. The humans escorted them down the mountain with professional courtesy and devastating competence, using Zephyrian communication protocols to contact the Imperial ship in orbit and arrange extraction. Admiral Vashi's face on the transport shuttle's communication screen was a study in barely controlled fury. "Explain to me, Quartermaster, how you managed to fail a routine elimination mission against primitive humans." "Sir, they weren't primitive," Vorthak began, but the Admiral cut him off. "They were humans, Quartermaster. Humans with sticks and chemical propulsion. And somehow, they defeated the Empire's most decorated sniper using what? Luck?" Vorthak tried to explain about the reverse-engineered technology, the electronic warfare, the systematic infiltration of their position. With each word, Admiral Vashi's expression grew darker. "Are you telling me," the Admiral said slowly, "that these humans have not only matched our technology but surpassed it?" "Sir, I believe they've been learning from our mistakes for years. Every raid, every mission, every piece of equipment we've lost, they've been studying it, improving on it, preparing for exactly this kind of encounter." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. "Then report to command upon return. Pending investigation. Your service record is under review." The communication ended, leaving Vorthak alone with the wreckage of his reputation and career. Through the shuttle's viewport, he could see the human settlement growing smaller as they ascended toward orbit. And there, standing in the compound's central courtyard, was a tiny figure that could only be Amy Kowalski. She was holding what appeared to be a Zephyrian observation scope, probably salvaged from one of their previous raids, and she was watching their departure. Even at this distance, even through the shuttle's limited optics, Vorthak could swear she was smiling. As they reached orbital altitude, his communication system received one final transmission from the surface. "Thank you for the field test, Quartermaster. Your equipment will be very useful in defending other human colonies." Do give our regards to Admiral Vashi, Lieutenant Colonel Amy Kowalski, Human Colonial Defense Force Xenotech Division. The message was accompanied by what his cultural database identified as a human gesture of farewell. Vorthak closed his eyes and tried to forget that somewhere below, humans were probably already dismantling his legendary rifle, learning its secrets, preparing to use Imperial technology against the Empire itself. The age of easy victories over primitive humans, he realized, was over.